think we're live.
Ooh,
I haven't seen the picture yet, but it says live. That's a good start.
that's good.
Oh, we did it.
Yay!
Here, I'll slide over, I think. It's weird now. I'm not used to seeing the delay.
Uh-huh, the delay is weird, right?
Yeah, but I think we're live,
Ooh, we're
live
definitely
lit and
live.
local.
Whoa, there's an
Yeah,
entire
I know.
picture.
I moved it. I think we're live. Yeah, I moved the wrong direction because you also moved me. So I'll move, but don't move me.
Alright, I will not move you.
I think also go ahead and get rid of the overlay
Oh,
thing.
I like the overlay thing. I think that's good.
Just because it's white and it doesn't, it's like it should be transparent.
Okay,
You can keep it. It's fine. You can keep it. It doesn't
I'm
matter.
gonna keep it because I like it.
So anyway, welcome one and all to kind of an interesting low brass use stream. Interesting in that I am not in my normal studio. I am in the land of mini lakes. One might say 10,000 lakes. I believe that's the official number. I'd have to check with my in-laws who are geologists.
Someone must be
They
that.
might have a more accurate number. But yes, I'm currently in Minnesota, and Connor is kind of running the stream from his end. I flew with a desktop computer to try to make this happen and a cinema camera. So we're it's an interesting stream, but nonetheless, we should be able to make everything work. So I'm pretty sure all the technical stuff is working. Connor and I are both pretty sure. That being said, as we always talk about, our streams are flawless when it comes to the technical problems. We've never had an issue. Everything is perfect. That being said, today, if there is a problem, let us know. If you can only hear one of us or something like that, please let us know. But I think we should be good. So yeah, we have a few topics planned. One that I kind of talked about because I was hanging out with my in-laws today, and my mother-in-law was asking me about, because she was like, didn't you go to the Edwards factory and get an Edwards? And I was like, yeah, I did. And it's just like, do you still like that horn a lot? And I was like, well, funny that you might mention that. I don't own that horn anymore. Connor does. So I thought it might be fun to talk about like the what that horn is and how it came to be and what I used it for, what you used it for, I just feel like that's an interesting story.
That's a trombone
Um,
with a checkered past and lots of different roles and different players. It's got a little story to tell.
right. So, that trombone, essentially when I was 16, I think, when you're 16 and a trombone tells you it loves you, you're going to believe it, right? Isn't that how that song goes?
That's right.
Um, but yeah, so when I was 16, I went up to the Edwards factory and got that instrument. And I was very into like the idea of like dark sounds. Like that was, you hear like buzzwords and you're just like, yeah, that's what I want. It's like I want dark and rich and chocolatey. Like those are the sort of like words that and when people hear you say them, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. So that's why that bell has a lot of copper. And that I also will segue into that a little bit later. I want to talk about the different iterations of brass as if I'm a material science expert,
You
which
are.
I will be very clear I am not. Um, but it's funny because both of my mother and father-in-law are both geologists, so it's like they have some questions that are material science is kind of like an overlap of some things. They'll ask me questions about materials and things. It's like I think I know, but maybe I don't know anymore. But anyway, so that trombone, it's 5084, which is on the larger side of small.
Yeah, that's a good
Certainly,
way to say it.
it's still small.
It's a large
If you,
small.
it's a large small, and so that it's a 508 with a nickel slide, and then it's I believe what Edward says the rose brass bell, which we'll get into the percentages of copper and zinc maybe a little bit later, because I think that's kind of an interesting thing that we haven't really explored yet on these live streams. I could be wrong, but I don't think that we've talked about German brass, gold brass, rose brass, yellow brass, all copper, all those sorts of things. But yeah, so and then the bell, it's like they only have one bell size, I think. And then isn't the neck pipe yellow brass?
Um, yes, yes, the neck pipe is in
I
fact
think that,
yellow brass.
yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, it's a great horn. It's funny, especially because we get a lot of people on stream or on comments on the channel or on Instagram or LinkedIn. Just kidding, no one doesn't. I'm not on LinkedIn, but you know, various comments for different things. People will often say, it's like, is this trombone better than this one? And so it's like, yeah, that's not exactly how it works. You know, um, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. I just realized we're not at the correct resolution, but I think we're just not going to worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Um, my father says picking up an echo from Connor and also can barely hear Connor as compared to Zach.
Ah, okay. I can boost my levels. How am I having an echo happening? There shouldn't be an echo. Oh, I have an idea. What if I turn down the auxiliary and then
Is your gain structure good? Is the level from the interface good?
it seems to be good. Let's see. I can definitely boost myself a little bit.
Well, also
To
because
hear
you
it
usually
more.
have the mic, usually have your mic a lot closer.
It's true. I could definitely get it closer. My mic over
Yeah,
here. Yeah, that looks
and
like.
usually, yeah, we it took us a while to get our normal setup correct, and now we're not a normal setup, so it's kind of like, you know, baby's first stream.
Yep.
In some ways, not saying upon you, just even me. It's like I'm using a different computer. It's like I used the computer that I could fit in my backpack, not my normal computer.
Right.
So hopefully that's better, and hopefully now you're hearing dogs on my end. I'm in a house currently with 3 dogs that don't really all get along perfectly. So we'll hear the noises we're going to hear.
Oh, I have an idea. I know exactly what was going wrong. I was not muted in Zoom, so I was probably coming through. That was it. That should be better.
Hopefully, I'll say, is this better? And
What's better?
hopefully my father will help us with that. So, but yeah, right now we'll assume that it's better. If you're just hearing that and a few seconds delayed and you realize it's not better, my sister just hopped on and said that it is better. So all my immediate family is together right now, and they said that they were going to all hop on the stream on all separate devices, which is probably why we have 5 whole viewers right now.
That would make sense.
So it's probably all 4 of them that are there. But maybe my new niece and nephew also have their own devices. I'm not sure. Not sure. They're not even a month old, so I don't know how many how many iPad hours they're allowed at 3 weeks old. I haven't read the parenting manuals to know exactly. But anyway, so back to the Edwards T302. Back to your regularly scheduled content. The Edwards T302 that I went up and got at the factory, and then you later bought for me. It's an interesting. Well, I wasn't going to out you for that. But my sister says no screen time allowed.
No screen time allowed. Well, in this fast-moving digital age, I think getting a leg up on understanding the interfaces is only going to put you at an advantage from a business perspective.
Right, at 3 weeks old, they really should know all their major scales. Right. Let's be honest.
We considered major scales, maybe coding lessons.
Right. But yeah, that trombone, it's a very good. No one's saying it's a bad trombone, but it wasn't the trombone for what I was looking to do at the time.
What were you looking to do at the time?
Well, it wasn't. To sum it down to a very simple, thing, it wasn't bright enough. and that's not really what you were looking for because you were playing on trombones that were arguably too bright. No offense or anything.
They were very small, but that was the only size they came in at the stores I was shopping at the time.
Right. So it's just like they only have skinny jeans. I guess I'll wear skinny jeans. It's like
this was like a jeggings trombone, very small. The one that I was
right.
playing on before.
Yeah, because you were primarily playing on an old super.
Correct.
Which
I don't even know what the bore size is, if you can call it a bore. I don't know what the sum of the lengths of the dodecagonal prism was, and we've gotten into the weeds of this. But what would that be? The
I
perimeter?
think was that last.
I've not calculated the perimeter of the 12-sided shape of the dodecagonal prism.
Well, but it's about the diameter, right? Not the or is that what you said? Sorry.
Correct. Well, it wouldn't be a diameter technically because it's not a circle.
Because it's not a circle, right? Yeah.
So it's tricky.
So is that just like the furthest point that we measure from, like from point to point across the 12-sided thing?
I mean, I would assume that all of the 12 sides are equal in length, but I probably shouldn't assume that. I should probably measure each one.
No, but I agree that they're probably equal in length, but are we going from one directly over to the other, or are we going from side to side? Because that would be different, correct?
It would be different.
Is my basic...
Oh, I understand what you're saying. So, like, the distance of that, yeah, that's a difficult area to calculate.
Yeah, we're not mathematicians.
We need someone smarter than us. Let's get away from this. The moral of the story was your pants were too big and my pants were too small, and everyone else was wearing medium pants, and we felt silly.
There you go.
We had to get more regular pants. Both of us had something to gain from each other.
Right. So you went a little bit. You went to the bigger horn, and I went to the smaller horn. I think that everybody won.
Yeah.
Ultimately. Right. So yeah, that was kind of our thinking, and I think that horn, especially for because you kind of fast forward to today, you now have another small bore trombone in the Jiggs Wiggum model, which I would say is that's the skinny. You went back to the skinny jeans, but maybe not quite as. Because I think the old super isn't that a 7-inch bell?
Yeah. It was
7. 7 is small.
It looked like a flugelhorn bell. It was so small. But it had that cool. It had the silver tone ring around it with all the fancy engraving. That's the coolest thing.
The garland.
Old horns. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so.
It looks really cool. I like it. Very visually appealing.
Yeah, it's a nice little touch. It's a very German thing. I'm like one of my tubas from Germany has that, and that's a common thing. You'll see that on German style trombones, except for it'll be a lot thicker. It'll be like
a wider band.
This many.
That many.
Yeah, that many. It'll be bigger. Like if you look at maybe like the Marcus Lecter German style trombones, we might be going down too far of a rabbit hole. But it is we can go down rabbit holes sometimes. One thing that I think would be helpful is maybe to actually I'm thinking. Hold on, give me 1 second to be one with my thoughts. Maybe like the Marcus Lecter German style trombones. I wonder if it would be better to stop and restart and fix the resolution. But maybe that's not necessary.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, we won't worry about it. We will be on our we're on our DVD quality.
This is the off the rails edition of Low Brass U anyway, so no holds barred.
Right.
Resolution is out the window.
Yeah, we're at 480p, which is that's when you switch your DVD player from the red, white, and yellow to the component where it's the like orange, green, blue, red, and white for audio. We're at the elevated DVD quality.
Okay.
But yeah, one thing that might be interesting, and I'm kind of curious to hear what you know, Connor. Not to put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot. Just don't ask me a math
but
question.
it's kind of there's percentages.
All right, let's hear it.
but what your knowledge and what your thoughts are on the various alloys of brass.
Oh.
As it pertains to brass instruments.
So the theme is material science.
Yeah, we're going back to that.
And you're asking me what I know about the mixtures of metals. I don't know anything. I don't even know like what is required to make brass. What is brass? Like, is that its own thing? Is that a mixture of things?
It is what they call in the industry an alloy.
Okay, so what is in brass?
So brass is a combination of copper and zinc, as I understand it. This is very, like, let's be very clear. This is a brass podcast, or brass instrument podcast. If we say something that's not 100% true in the material science world, I can live on that. I can live with that. But yeah, so it's a combination of brass is a combination of copper and zinc.
Oh my gosh.
But there are different alloys of brass, or there are different combinations of percentages of those things. Okay. So yellow brass is by far the most common.
Right.
And yellow brass is 70-30. 70% copper, 30% zinc.
I see. And it makes it yellow in color.
Right.
Goldish-ish. Goldish yellow. Metallic.
When you think about normal brass instruments that are yellow brass, that is the color that is. Yellow brass is kind of the standard.
Okay. And so you're telling me that the more copper that you add, the redder the metal becomes. Is that essentially how I am to understand it?
Yes, there are a couple of, not exceptions to that, but there are other factors at play, I would say.
What are the other factors?
I think we should save that for later.
All right, let's save it for later. So, okay. So
just to be very clear with all of this, we're talking about what the fundamental thing is made of, right. Which just as like a kind of preview, you can plate anything in something else or add any sort of layer of something, like, lacquer is an epoxy, like that's a layer on top of the brass.
Oh yeah.
So we're at a very fundamental level right now.
We're not talking about layer or lacquers or anything. We're just talking about the metal. Because there's some lacquers that are weird colors, like that thing that King always does, which I think it looks cool, but I like the color. I think the metal is so I definitely I think raw brass just looks so cool, and it's like one of those things that even if it's a placebo thing, I don't care. It's like driving a car with flames on the side of it. Like if I'm playing a trombone that doesn't have a lacquer, I feel cool, and that doesn't. I don't care if that actually translates into me sounding any better. It's like the stripes make the car go faster.
And we'll get to that. I definitely want to talk about plating. Yeah, right. But suffice to say, we're talking about the very bare metal itself before it's plated, before it's lacquered, before there's any coating outside of that. Mm-hmm. So yellow brass, again, if you're just tuning in, yellow brass, 70-30, 70% copper, 30% zinc. And then the next step up from that, and I think I moved the wrong direction, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm not used to. I'm used to being able to have ultimate control of my own business. So I think I'll be good now.
You look very handsome and in frame.
Thank you. Those are the only two things. This video podcast is that I'm handsome and in frame.
Yes.
So I look good, and you can see me looking good. Those are the things that matter. So I'm gonna pull up a little helpful cheat sheet on Edwards' website, because I know some of this, but I don't want to get the numbers wrong. Let's see. And Edwards doesn't even have all of the iterations. So yellow brass, according to Edwards, and also like these are kind of rough numbers. Like, let's be very clear. This isn't like I don't think there's a governing body that says yellow brass is exactly 70-30.
Right.
But then rose brass is the next one up, according to Edwards, and we'll talk. Edwards doesn't have all of them listed, but they have all the ones that they have, listed. And rose brass, which is your slash the artist previously known as my trombone. That trombone is rose brass, or the bell, I should say. The flare and stem of the bell, that is rose brass. We have to zoom in a little bit.
Sure.
And rose brass, according to Edwards, which I think every company does, these numbers probably aren't perfectly exact, is 85% copper, 15% zinc. And then red brass, according to Edwards, 90% copper, 10% zinc.
I see.
And just an aside, higher copper content, this is from Edwards, higher copper content bells generally are very dark in soft volumes, but become more brilliant in louder volumes. Yellow brass bells are more consistent in timbre throughout all registers and dynamics. That's probably not exactly what I would have said, but I'm also, they probably have a little bit more material science knowledge in there than I do.
Right.
So then additionally to that, there's German brass, and I'm just going to pull up. I think that is in between rose and red. I'm just going to see what the internet tells me, which, the internet has never been wrong before.
No, it's never told any lies.
We're going on Trombone Chat. So according to Trombone Chat, according to Matt K, he's posted almost 2,000 times. So if you're talking a lot, you definitely have all the answers. So he also says that gold brass is, well, this is not as helpful. So gold brass, Edwards doesn't do gold brass, but Bach does. And according to this, that's 80-20, where rose brass is 85-15. So it's not quite as much.
Right.
Or no, sorry. It's not as much copper. And then, let's see, does it have German on here? No, it doesn't, even though that's what I searched for. So basically they're we're kind of doing a deep dive in this, but they're all different amounts of things, amounts of copper and zinc in these different trombones. And so that changes the sonic properties, it changes the overtones, and not the overtone series itself, but the overtones that are produced when you play one single pitch. But also that can be controlled at a personal level. It matters, but it doesn't matter, if that makes sense. So the point of it, going back to this specific Edwards T302, it's a darker, warmer iteration of this instrument, I would say. At least that's how I kind of feel about it. So this instrument was kind of a little bit of a darker thing for you, but it was too dark for what I was looking to do.
Right.
And now I wish I still had it. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't play it for a lot of my gigs, but it's a great trombone is the moral of the story. But kind of maybe a good segue would be to talk about the plating or the lacquer or lack thereof. Is that a pun? Does that count as a pun?
It does. I'll count it.
Okay.
Points on the board.
Going through that side of things, so you were kind of conflating the two of what these things are and what they look like.
Right.
Right. So you were making it seem like if it looks this way, it is 100% this thing to its core.
Right.
And that is not necessarily true, because it could be gold brass, it could be yellow brass, and then it could be plated in silver. And then you don't know what it looks like underneath.
I didn't even think about silver plating when we were talking about this, because there's a big difference between something that's silver plated and like a sterling silver bell that would just be made of silver through, right?
I guess just to go back one step we didn't talk about sterling silver bells, but those are another material that bells can be made of. And, you know, we could also include carbon fiber. You know, shout out to Dave Butler.
Yeah.
Shout out to DeCarbo. Are there other carbon fiber bell manufacturers? I'm not trying to leave anybody out.
Those are just the two that I know. That might be of my own ignorance and my own personal. I don't know. I might be a biased person just because I like Butler trombones because I've geographically been closer to them and know people that work with them.
Right. But you know, if we're talking about metal trombones, I guess is a good way to put this in its own bubble, I guess. So essentially, all of these different things. Sterling silver is another one that we can talk about, and sterling silver trombones are going to be silver through and through, and sterling silver is a complicated alloy in itself. I believe that sterling silver is usually 92.5% silver, and I think the rest is copper, if I remember correctly. Because silver on its own is very soft.
That makes sense. And so for it to have some sort of integrity and behave in the same way that something that was brass, the copper helps the silver. Whereas, so maybe copper the harder metal? Is that what I'm getting from this? Is that the one that has more structural integrity, and that the zinc?
Well, between copper and zinc, I don't know. You're definitely asking good questions that I don't have the answer.
Because
and we got a great question that just came in from Brian, but we will answer that question 100%.
Oh yeah.
We gotta go. We'll answer that after the metal. We'll circle back to what it's plated in, because I want to answer Brian's question, because that's fun.
Yes, let's get to that. I want to do my armchair diagnosis and see if I'm correct, and we can go back and fact check me to see if I'm right or wrong. But it sounds like, judging from the information that we've just talked about so far, that as Edwards tells us on their website, when you add copper to an alloy, the behavioral change of the metal and the way that it vibrates is that it is darker, which to me, when I think of like a darker thing, I think like something with more mids and lows in it. So maybe the metal does not vibrate as freely. And then maybe, what does more brilliant mean at the higher dynamics? Does that mean that it just has a more, like a radical curve from mids and lows to adding lots of highs? That makes me think of a metal that is not as freely vibrating until you totally max it out, and then it's probably shaking violently, whereas a softer metal might have a more gradual give from the low dynamic to the high for that consistency. Because of that, I think that, and because of silver being a softer metal, we're going to guess that copper has, I don't know what the scale is, like the hardness of metal. I'm
the Mohs hardness scale?
That one. We should see if copper is higher than zinc. Or perhaps the next question is, silver? Is silver softer than zinc? Probably.
I think silver is definitely the softest thing on this until we get to gold.
I see.
I think as far as the things that pertain to brass instruments, I think silver and gold are the softest. Gold being the absolute softest, which we can talk about, especially with mouthpieces. You know, how the soft feeling of gold. I mean, it's still a metal.
I don't know. I'm definitely on the gold mouthpiece train. We can talk about that when we get there.
Right. I've got a dog that's staring at me and crying, so I'm going to go off camera just for a second.
Okay.
I think only Connor can hear me now because the camera or the microphone is a little bit directional.
I don't know. I'm getting some audio input.
Okay.
Actually, no. I'm just kidding on that. That's me. I'm looking at my microphone because I'm a fool and I don't know which microphone is which. But for those of you keeping score at home while Zach is dealing with the pup.
Well, I think they can hear me now. I'm back in frame. I might have to. My dog Zoe needed some water, so we'll see what she does past that point.
Hi, Zoe.
She's drinking the water right now. But yeah, let's get to go back to your thing. I don't know. You're asking really great questions that I don't have the answer to, and you're asking tough questions that we need a material scientist or an instrument manufacturer or someone like that to kind of tell us.
Yes, something that those are like questions that we can leave that first part of that topic with, and maybe come back to them later. It'd be a fun thing to circle back on.
Right. So I wanted to answer Brian's question, and because I think that's another rabbit hole to go down. Apparently they heard me off camera. That's good. Yes. So essentially, the TIS, as Brian put it. Connor, would you like to tell the class what TIS stands for?
I don't know what TIS stands for.
You don't know what TIS stands for?
No!
I wasn't trying to prove. I wasn't trying to.
I'm not afraid of an educational risk, but I don't know. Trombone Internet Synergy. This is
none of those were correct.
Trombone.
So I'll give you one at a time. Tuning.
Oh, okay. Tuning in the slide.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm familiar. I have never personally played one for like any extended amount of time. Like any time that I see one, I'm like, hey, can I touch that and like try it? And
right.
That's pretty much been my relationship. I would say that I have like a ooh, look at that sort of relationship with tuning in the slide trombones. I know everyone who has a tuning in the slide trombone is like really smart, and they take the time to explain to me why it is significant that the tuning is in the slide. I have heard the explanation probably a dozen times in my life. I cannot tell you the significance of tuning in the slide. I got another guess. Why is tuning in the slide important? Because does that change the size of the outer slide that you're operating with? And that way it's even, like, is there something about the relationship of the part that you're actually manipulating, the slide, and the tuning adjustment being a part of this? That's not important? Then why do we do it?
Think about the word taper.
Oh, okay. So is it because of the diameter of the tubing that you're manipulating? Is that why? What does it mean, taper?
So if you don't have tuning in the slide, how do you tune your instrument?
You tune it in the back. The little thing right around the bell curve.
So where that is, think about it this way. That is a consistent increase in size, right?
Uh-huh.
When you pull out the tuning slide, there are two pockets that are not consistent. They're consistent, they stay the same, but the rate of is not going up in the same way. Does that make sense?
Wait, say that part again. I wasn't listening close enough and I got confused by the end of it.
So if you have the tuning slide all the way in, the rate of change it's not exactly consistent, but it's changing over the entire time of the tuning slide. Does that make sense?
Okay, so what you're saying is, I've got my tuning slide all the way pushed in. Little side is one diameter, big side is another diameter, and because of that, the bendy part, the U-tube, that is gradually, like conical style, it's just slowly, perfectly at an exact increasing rate getting bigger. Whereas the
exact rate is not what I'm trying to say, but essentially.
But as opposed to, when you stick your tuning slide in, the stockings for that have to be perfect cylinders and they don't change. Is that what you're talking about?
Sort of. So if you pull out your slide a little bit, there's going to be a moment in time where those legs of the tuning slide are the exact same size, and it kind of breaks up this somewhat consistent taper through that bend of the trombone. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the point of tuning in the slide is that you put it at a point in the trombone, because all brass instruments are a combination of cylindrical and conical. We like to say this instrument's conical, this instrument's cylindrical.
Just has more of one or the other, maybe.
Right. Cylindrical is a perfect cylinder. There's no brass instrument that starts one size and stays that size.
Right.
That's, we don't have that. Conical also, we don't have one that constantly is getting bigger throughout the entire length of the instrument.
Right.
All of them kind of stay the same size, and then they get bigger at some point.
So a perfectly conical instrument would be truly the shape of a cone. So anything, like by definition, if it has a bell flare, that is not perfectly conical.
Right.
By like the definition of like the mathematical, like the geometric term of a cone.
Correct.
Okay, I get you.
So what the tuning in the slide does, it puts it in a spot in the trombone where it's perfectly cylindrical, or almost perfectly cylindrical. I know they're dual bore. Yeah, it's a cylinder. You know, your inner slide is a cylinder.
Right. And your crook of your slide is likely not getting bigger or smaller unless you have a dual bore slide, right?
Right. For the sake of this discussion, I will accept that as truth.
Okay.
But yeah, so essentially what the tuning in the slide does is it shifts, you know, we tune it there, we make the instrument longer or shorter in a spot where it's perfectly cylindrical.
Right.
Instead of upsetting the conical portion in the trombone that happens later.
Right.
So theoretically, it should not change the way the instrument plays, you know, because that if you're upsetting the, it's just it.
I get it.
If you're looking at the,
so the point, if you have tuning in the slide, then what the added benefit that you have is that once the trombone becomes conical, it remains conical the whole way out to the bell flare. There's no interruption in that gradual increase in diameter.
Right.
Okay.
So does that make sense as a concept?
That makes enough sense to me. So it's like the idea is the more consistent the shape, the less changes, you know, then the more free blowing, or maybe more consistent, or more purity of tone, or just like better vibrating machine it theoretically would be.
Right, and I think you can kind of see that when you play outside and things. You have to make a large adjustment to your tuning slide, and then your instrument doesn't really play the same.
Right.
In a tuning in the slide scenario, in a perfect world, that wouldn't happen quite to the same level.
Interesting.
So that's kind of the point of tuning in the slide, but let's talk about the unfortunate downside. So, you know, Connor, what would you say? Yeah, basically a pipe inside of a pipe, and has a mouthpiece on one. Oh, you're talking about, never mind. I think you're talking about something else. We'll get to that. Free American Empire. But so Connor, what might be the downside of having tuning in the slide?
The downside that I could imagine would be the added weight to the slide, and particularly the offset of balance, because the weight is probably at the very, very end of the slide, and that would.
Nope.
Oh no. Where is tuning? Oh, is it right by the hand?
It's more or less where your hand is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's less bad as far as like needs of counterweights and things like that, but it still feels like it would just make a clunkier, heavier slide. And then if you have two pieces of tubing that are overlapping in the outer slide, that makes your slide contact, it wouldn't be perfect, right?
No, I don't think that, you know, again, not necessarily an expert, but I think that for the most part that's not true.
Okay.
But the slide's definitely heavier.
Yeah.
So to go back to the initial question from Brian, have you guys ever played a tuning in the slide? Trombone, I have. And Connor, you already said that you have not.
No.
What is it like? All that we just discussed was kind of in a vacuum. Wasn't necessarily in the real world. What I'll say about having experienced it in the real world, I'm pretty sure it's real. I'm not sure that I noticed it.
Right, you're talking about the benefit of having your conical stay conical and your cylindrical stay cylindrical.
Right.
My oversimplification of it, but yes.
But yeah, that's what we needed right now.
Yeah.
So it's fine. I'm not sure that I 100% noticed it. That's definitely something I would like to do, kind of a deep dive, maybe a YouTube video about, maybe get some experts on there. Again, neither of us know everything, even if we combine our powers, we don't know everything. It'd be cool if we did, but um, we don't know everything. And tuning in the slide is kind of an old school thing. From a recommendation standpoint, I wouldn't recommend it. Just because it's not something we're really doing anymore. And if you're purely an orchestral player and you're playing things that are, I don't like the idea of adding weight to my slide.
Right.
I can't sign off on that. Do I play all carbon fiber slides? No, but I don't necessarily like the difference. Did you feel a difference from having more mass near the lead pipe? Again, these are good questions, Brian. I think if I played it all the time and had the exact same model that was tuning in the slide and wasn't tuning in the slide, like I had two like green hose because they used to do that a lot. Maybe I could tell you, but I think you're splitting hairs. I guess what I would say, if you try a trombone and it has tuning in the slide and you absolutely love it, you say, I have to have this trombone, don't let the tuning in the slide stop you.
Yeah, it's definitely not a deal breaker.
If you're looking at buying a trombone, you're like, should I pay for tuning in the slide? I wouldn't.
Right. There's other ways to add weight near the lead pipe, and that's something maybe we don't talk about a lot on this particular stream because neither of us have really spent a lot of time focusing on that, but people do till the cows come home. Think about different, not only adding metal, but subtracting it, and that's just a big discussion. Great posture. That's great. Yeah,
sorry, I'm trying to get slightly higher in the frame.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I figured sitting up higher and extending the neck and trying to I'm trying to do what I can.
Yeah, but that's a big can of worms, and I think my only real experience of messing around with mass near the lead pipe has been I've been doing a lot of flip flopping between Heritage series mouthpieces and the classic ones. This is all within the Dennis Wick cinematic universe of mouthpieces. One of them has probably a good deal of metal around it. It seems fairly, not particularly heavy, but certainly bigger than the Heritage, which I would say is remarkably light. It's pretty much just like the boop, boop, boop. It's just the silhouette of the cup, and then bada bing, bada boom. All of a sudden, you're in the mouthpiece.
So, I haven't verified this with my own system of I have a kitchen scale that I definitely can get to the quote unquote bottom of this. According to Dennis Wick, they don't weigh that much different.
Oh, really?
Different.
Interesting.
But the mass is distributed significantly differently.
Okay.
Which still kind of makes a difference. Brian, we'll get to the Free American Empire's question, but Brian's got some follow-up.
Yeah, let's follow up with Brian.
Bill Reichenbach plays tuning in the slide. I'm aware of that. Dependent Valves plays the best bebop any bass trombone out there somehow. Yeah, you've only said facts.
Yeah, that's three true things.
Well, I guess you said a fact. You said mostly facts, and then you said an opinion that I agree with.
Yes, we'll call it a fact
just to be
for the purpose of this.
Abundantly clear. He plays the best bebop of any bass trombone out there is an opinion. It is an opinion that I agree with.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately, I don't think if I had a student that had a really nice trombone and had tuning in the slide, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that tuning in the slide is holding you back. You'd be such a better trombonist if you didn't have tuning in the slide. I think that's a bit silly. But I would. It's an upcharge that to me doesn't make sense necessarily. It to pay for, and that's my official stance. I would like to get one at some point. I'd like to get like an old Con that has it. That's kind of like one of the ones that like I think about sometimes, or maybe even a green hoe that has it. Like what Bill Reichenbach plays, and and also going back to the dependent valves thing. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily. It's fewer options. Definitely a dependent with tuning in the slide. To me, that's like a tone first, playability second.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can't play it well.
Right. And I imagine a lot of, I don't know specifically what work Bill Reichenbach does on the tuning.
A lot of recording.
Well, specifically with that horn. or like the horn thing
That's
does
that's
have tuning in the slide. Like,
to my knowledge, you know, Bill Reichenbach and I don't text a lot,
right?
but
not in touch.
or ever. I like the closest I've ever been to him is one of his students is someone that I'm like aware of, and we've talked before. We haven't talked in like 5 years or something, but like, you know, it's 8 years. I don't know, long time. But no, well, we don't have anything against each other. We just have, you know, I met him when I was in the Disney band.
Oh, okay.
One of the saxophone players was roommates in LA with a bass drum player who studied with Bill Reichenbach. Pat Leonard's. You know, if Pat Leonard's is watching, good to see you again. I don't think he is, but yeah, you know, he's a great bass trombone player, and he studied with Bill Reichenbach. So, you know, when I met him, I was like, oh, Bill Reichenbach, like I've got questions.
Sure.
But yeah, Brian saying wanting any Conor tuning in the slide bass. Yeah, I mean, tuning in the slide, it's a cool idea. At this point, I don't know that it's necessary, especially if you're playing indoors mostly. I don't think it matters. If you're playing outdoors, I could see it being a little bit more important because your tuning slide fluctuations would be great. If you're going indoors, outdoors. I guess my point is, in the real world, your tuning slide's not moving a lot, so you get used to the taper of your specific setup, and maybe it moves a little bit. And maybe when you miss a note, that's the reason, but I don't know. I don't know that I see that exactly.
Right. I would say.
So let's go.
One closing thought on that: the inconsistencies in my intonation and my note accuracy. Like, I feel like I have so much pilot error in my playing that I don't know if I could really tell you if I went back to a recording like that was a note because I wasn't concentrating. That was because the taper in my bell was different. That one was because, you know, X, Y, and Z. But I don't know. Maybe I would feel differently if I spent more time on a tuning in the slide trombone.
No, I definitely agree. It's like you can always find a reason why something bad happened or something like that. But yeah, so Free American Empire says, what about a brass instrument that is just a cylindrical tube with a slide inside that you can extend? So basically sort of like a pipe inside of a pipe, I guess,
Don't they have that?
and has a mouthpiece on one end and open on the other. Not that I can think of that's just like a straight cylinder through and through.
No, there's a type.
What are you thinking of?
Oh, not a cylinder, but isn't there a type of vuvuzela that does that? That has it can go in and out?
Yes.
Yeah. So that would, I mean, it would be conical.
Right, it flares at the end.
Right.
So Brian, sorry to go back to tuning in slide, but Brian has been on streams many times. I feel like all of Brian's questions are great. Not saying anybody else's questions aren't great, but Brian's got really good questions, and every time it's like, yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's like,
right.
You know, so Brian says also GR, which I assume he's talking about George Roberts. Played a tuning in slide, but I'm a bit tired of people on Trombone Chat raving about George Roberts, even though he does sound fantastic, hence why I didn't bring it up. Sure. Yes, and I agree with those sentiments. George Roberts, you know, we wouldn't have the bass trombone the way we have it today without George Roberts. Let's be very clear about that. You know, putting the bass trombone in front of the band was not something that was at all acceptable. And George Roberts was very instrumental, no pun, in getting bass trombone players to the front. And so, yeah, on trombone, I spend sometimes on Trombone Chat. I mean, I did today, right, to find those percentages. That was what Google took me to. You know, at the end of the day, with the internet, you can find lots of opinions. You can find a lot of people saying facts. I was talking about this earlier. It's just like the amount of knowledge on the internet is there, but not everyone is right. And Trombone Chat is one of those places where there are people who actually do really know what they're talking about, but you might lose that in people who don't necessarily. And I don't spend a lot of, Trombone Chat is past when I spent a lot of time on forums personally. That was, I spent a lot of times on forums in like high school, and that was, Trombone Chat is a relatively new endeavor. But yeah, George Roberts did play tuning in the slide, and that, tuning in the slide overall is an older concept. It's something that is not, it's not a young thing. It's not a newfangled thing. It's something that, like, if we're doing it now, we're going back to something that happened a while ago.
I see.
And I think George Roberts played on like something like a 72H, I believe. Brian might know better than me, actually. It's, you know, pushing the limits of my knowledge to tell you what. He definitely played closed rap con that I believe to be a 72H. With tuning in the slide, and that's totally fine. You know, if it works, it works. And, you know, I think you have to realize it's like, just because George Roberts, and I'm not saying Brian is saying this necessarily, but George Roberts probably played the trombone if you get a hold of. You know, we're in a little bit of a different situation now with the ability to, you know, if I have the money, I can go on the internet and order, you know, 30 different trombones right now.
Right.
You know, at that point in time, it's like you could go to a factory and whatever they had there, you could get. And that might be the only trombone you can get for like the next few years.
Right.
It just wasn't so simple. The world wasn't set up the way that it is now. So yeah, you know, I'm not saying he didn't like tuning in the slide, but I think you have to be careful with some assumptions that someone from the 1950s was doing something because it's absolutely what they wanted to do versus what was convenient. And even now, it's like I play the trombones that I already own. You know, it's like I'm not, you know, and some of those work great for certain things, but like, you know, the Bach 16 that I play, I really like it. I'd probably prefer something slightly smaller for a lot of the work that I do, but that would require me buying another trombone. Do I need it? No. Do I want it? Maybe, but
some days.
Can I do my job? You know, can I do my job on the other one just fine? Yes. So I do. You know, it's ultimately like that's the sign of a good player. And I'm not saying this as myself, but I'm just saying in general, you have to be able to do whatever job you have to do on the tool that you have in your hands. And I talk about that with tuba stuff a lot. It's like, oh, this is an F tuba excerpt. Oh, this is a C tuba excerpt. It's like, well, in some situations you may only have one tuba, and you're going to have to play it on the tuba that you brought. Or you might be going on tour with an orchestra and you only want to bring one tuba and this one excerpt is kind of on the fringe. Do you want to carry around two tubas for this 3-week tour or whatever? You know, you don't want to do that. Or like musicals is a great example for trombones. Like I played a lot of musicals where I needed one valved E flat.
Right.
What am I going to do? Bring both? Bring a small bore and a large bore?
I wouldn't.
No. I don't want to do that.
Right.
So Brian says George Roberts played a lot of stuff, most famously a 70H, but finished on a signature cancel 1670 model. I did know that he switched to a cancel at some point. I read that, but I've never like seen that image. But yeah, 70H. I'm not, you know, to be a con expert. I feel like being an expert on vintage con trombones is one of the hardest things to do. Like the numbering, it's like the numbers mean nothing to the instrument. I mean, not nothing, but it's a really complicated thing, and they reuse numbers. Like a 62H now is a bass trombone, but I've seen small bores that were 62Hs at one point. You know, it's just like there are people who know about it, and there are websites that help. I think it's called the Con Loyalist is like the website that I always go back to. He also had some Holton, but it wasn't his signature model specifically. Yeah, I mean they're right. There's so many trombones from that era that like you might know, you might not know. It's complicated. I definitely don't have all the answers when it comes to that sort of stuff. But yeah, so maybe we got a little bit of time left. I didn't want to do a super long stream tonight. I do have to get back to Texas tomorrow. My plan is to leave at 5 a.m.
Oh boy.
Central Time. We'll see if that happens. It's about a 14 or so hour drive. I like to drive when there's no lighting issue. I don't like to drive in the dark.
That's no fun.
I think he worked on the Yamaha 612 as well, which is what Phil Teal was famous for playing on. The George Robertson's relationship with Yamaha was short-lived. Yeah, I feel like Brian, you might be the expert on this among all of us right now.
Yeah,
I know things about George Roberts, but I don't know everything about George Roberts for sure. I like to drive when there's awesome. So but yeah, so I've got that drive to do, and I'd like to get back before dinner time, because it is tomorrow is my wedding anniversary, and I'd like to be there for dinner time.
Congratulations!
It would be nice.
By the way,
thank you,
and you're welcome.
Thank you.
Also,
yeah. For the four concurrent viewers, Connor was the person who performed the ceremony at my wedding.
That's right. So if any of the 4 people watching need to get married, yeah, it's surprisingly easy to become inefficient, and it really enriches your life. And you could have a friend do it, or you could have me do it on the stream. There you go.
Right. I don't think you can do it on the stream. Just
I don't think
for legal
that,
reasons.
Yeah,
I think that is inaccurate.
That actually varies county to county, so you'd have to check with your county clerk. See if you can
check your local listings.
Yep.
But yeah, Brian's saying because Yamaha wanted him to pay for developing the 612. Yeah,
they wanted him to pay for developing.
George
That's
Roberts.
Whack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we try not to shame anybody, but Yamaha shouldn't have had.
We're not shaming anybody. We're shaming an idea of making someone.
Right. I feel like we've got a good zoomed out perspective of certain things. It's like we like certain things, we dislike certain things. A lot of it's funny because people are just like, does this company make good trombones? Does this one make good trombones? Like at this point, they all do.
We live in a wild time in history. There are lots of.
But they don't.
To play.
They don't make the best tool for what you're doing in every situation. Like the simple analogy that I always like to talk about is, let's talk about hammers and sledgehammers and things. Depending on what you're doing, like if you're nailing nails into something, would you rather have a sledgehammer or a hammer? A small, what is it, S-twing? Someone's gonna flame me for pronouncing that hammer brand incorrectly. But I think it's S-twing is like the main brand or something. It's something like that. I have one. I don't know. I did a minimal amount of research. But yeah. So if you're nailing nails into something, you don't want a sledgehammer. Can a sledgehammer do that? Sure. Is it inefficient? Is it the best way to do it? No. Yes, it's inefficient. Is it the best way to do things? No. But that's the sort of thing. A sledgehammer could do everything because it's big enough. If you had to destroy some concrete or something, is a regular hammer going to do it? Probably not. And that's a very zoomed out sort of analogy of, this trombone can do everything. There's no trombone that does everything the best.
Right.
There's no instrument that does everything the best. There are some that you can get by and do all of these different things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a complicated thing, I guess, is my overall point. But the days of companies not making good stuff, I feel like that's mostly over. There are some examples, but we're not here to shame them, because maybe a lot of your favorite companies might have not made great instruments when they first started.
Right.
And they were probably copying another company when they first started, and they didn't do it as well.
That's a great place to start.
It's a complicated thing, right? But that's in the case of like Yamaha, a lot of their instruments were copies at first. They're not really anymore. And I don't know exactly from the start if they were good or bad, but now a lot of them are really good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just my point is it's a complicated thing for sure. But yeah, so let's go ahead and kind of close out the stream by going back to our original kind of topic of the brass alloys and things and what they look like, and how we can't take what they look like to be what they are.
Right.
Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a trombone bell by its plating.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's if we kind of go with simple colors of like a yellow or gold-ish color, that's basically all brass, and that's anything that is so brass with lacquer or gold-plated.
Right.
So thinking about it from that perspective, lacquer in itself, and you can, this is true of other lacquers used in like, woodworking and things like that. Lacquer's essentially it's just a coating on top of it. It generally is pretty clear. But there are certain like two-part epoxy lacquers like Kahn used to use and like my C-tuba has, where it's a darker, richer color.
Yeah.
So thinking about it from that then it's like it's yellow brass, but it looks gold brass.
Right. Or like sometimes even like
Because
orangey.
there's a coating on top of that.
So that's just the nature of the epoxy. That's not. I always thought maybe that was some sort of aesthetic decision that was made. It was like we're gonna do orange gold.
Well, I think I'm not sure the chicken and the egg necessarily of did they want to change the color and they used a different lacquer, or did they use a different lacquer that happened to change the color? That's slightly above my pay grade. Someone knows.
Right.
It's just not me. But yeah, so that, and then there's plating of silver and gold. Those are other things that change the color. And gold plating is usually silver plated first, then gold plated on top of that.
That's expensive.
Right, and it's only gotten more expensive.
Something to note is like the difference between a gold brass bell and a gold plated. Like that would be like, don't be fooled by someone trying to sell you a horn on Craigslist and say, oh, it's a gold brass bell. It's like, well, you think that means something really cool.
What I would say is that if it says gold plated, it's probably wrong.
You think so?
There are gold-plated trombones and low brass instruments, but they're at this point especially, they're pretty rare.
Right.
When gold prices were cheaper, they were slightly more common, but that's really more of a trumpet thing. And nowadays it's very rare. Again, it definitely can happen. One of my trombone teachers, Brett Schuster, his trombone is gold-plated.
Is that what
I don't know exactly.
Is their stuff gold-plated?
That's what they used to do.
Okay.
I don't think they do that officially anymore.
Okay.
But yes, that was a thing that they did for a while. Is they all played on gold-plated instruments. So it does exist. I'm not trying to say it doesn't exist, but the price has gone up so much so that it existing it's not that likely. Is what I would say. If we're talking about trumpets, it's a little bit different. Yeah, Brian says gold-plated trombones would probably cost two of your kidneys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least two of your kidneys, probably more of your kidneys.
And I think I inquired about it at one point. So there's a place in Indiana, in either Elkhorn or Elkhart. I can't remember which one is in Wisconsin, where Edwards is, and which one is in Indiana.
Too many Elks.
And where I don't know. Someone knows. Again, but the one where like Conselmer is, there's a plating company there called Anderson Silver Plating, and I think I called them one time and asked, because they do brass instruments and they do mouthpieces and stuff. And I think I asked them how much gold plating a trombone would be, and they were like, "You don't want to know." I think they quoted me like $3,000 or something.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like dumb and just was like, bored. "Oh, this would be cool."
Right.
Yeah, I was probably never gonna do it. Maybe if it was like $1,000, I would have considered it. But like, even if at that price, I shouldn't have done it, and I didn't do it. But at one point in time, it wasn't that expensive. And then again, trumpets, it's less mass. It's still easier to do, but you find that there are certain companies like Blackburn. I don't know if you're familiar with that company, Connor. It's a custom trumpet shop in Kentucky. And with Pickett, they're kind of partnered with Pickett at this point in time. But I don't know if they still do it, but at one point in time, they only did gold-plated trumpets.
Oh.
So that was like built into the cost. But yeah, nowadays, like there are gold-plated I would say that trombones getting gold-plated today is very, very rare. Trombones that already exist, that were already gold-plated, that you'll see that from time to time.
There are still some in circulation, but like it's not really cost-effective to produce a new gold-plated trombone.
I would say that if someone says that this trombone was gold-plated in the 21st century, I would be skeptical.
You want to go back and check some. You want to see some papers.
Right. But again, it exists, and it was a thing that you could get done. It wasn't astronomically expensive at some point. But then there are all these weird like other platings and things with colorations and things. I know like Rath does a lot of interesting things that I don't fully understand, like the coloring and how that all works. Because they'll do like black nickel, I think.
Oh, that's what that is.
I think that's nickel. Again, not the expert necessarily, but I guess the point of this discussion is not to clear up every plating or coating option. but to say what it looks like and what it is are not necessarily synonymous.
Right.
But yeah, I think we should maybe close it there unless you have any, kind of final comments, Connor, about that.
No, that's all we got for now. I'm still excited to see. I'm gonna go to what was it called? The hardness scale for like
Mohs hardness scale, I think is what it is.
All right. I'm gonna get to
You're
the
asking.
bottom of it.
You're asking like my high school science right now.
Well, we're gonna figure it out.
Yeah. So yeah. So thanks everyone for watching. I know the stream's been a little, it's a little bit weird. You can see things in the background. It's not just a weird gray background from me. It's like it's actually real. But yeah. So hope everyone enjoyed the stream, and we'll see everybody next week, which should be a pretty normal stream. Unless I'm mistaken, both of us can do Wednesday next week.
Yes, we can.
Cool. So we'll plan on that, and we'll see everybody then. So thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Cool, we did it.
We did it.